Let me tell you a little about a forthcoming event where I'll be talking about science and the sensitive and the proof behind the scientific proof behind your sixth sense. Now, this is a subject which has excited me for a number of years, but what especially I find exciting now is in the last few years, scientists have actually been finding evidence for some of the stuff that they have in the past perhaps rubbished or making light of. And that really is the transmission of feelings from person to person. For example, have you ever noticed if you're smiling a lot and you're happy, that other people become happier around you? And turn that around. Have you ever noticed a happy person coming into the room and you start to feel happier? Now, what happens there is you have a little circuit in your brain, and it's called the mirror neuron system, that actually mirrors the facial expressions, the body language of the people that you pay attention to. So let's say that happy person comes into the room. Your little brain cells actually mirror, they copy that person's facial expressions. So for example, your brain will mirror and will copy the smile here, using these muscles here called the zygomaticus major muscles. And if it's a really genuine smile, a real happy smile, then these muscles here, the orbicularis oculi, you don't have to know these names, it just sounds impressive, doesn't it? But these muscles here also get tweaked, and your brain mirrors the same muscles. And what that does is it sends a signal to your muscles and replicates in you the same muscles, the same muscular movements as you see in the other person. But not only that, it sends a signal further into your brain, to the emotional circuitry of your brain, and you even start to feel the same feelings as that person. And this is called emotional contagion. It's how emotions are contagious from one person to the next. And it's a real phenomena. In fact, it's so much a real phenomena and hot topic in science that psychologists are actually calling this, in some studies, mind reading. Isn't that incredible? Just a few years back, you know, if any person who talks about, you know, psychic phenomena had to say mind reading, they'd be laughed off the stage, you know, in a scientific audience. But here we now have scientists actually calling this mind reading, because in a sense what it is you are actually sensing the emotional state of another person, and there's real neurological wiring in the brain that allows us actually to do that. But let's take it a wee stage further. Let's say a person is talking with you or in your company, and they're acting like they're happy, but actually deep inside they're feeling fears and anxieties and worries, but they're masking it, they're faking how they're feeling, right? Does the same thing allow you to perceive how they're really feeling? And yes, it actually absolutely does, because as they communicate, hidden amongst the smiling and the language that they're using will be millisecond flashes of anxiety, of fears, of worries when they say something or hear something. And you know, get this, your brain will pick up on that also, and that will send a feedback signal to your emotional centres. And even though that person is acting happy, deep inside you're beginning to feel, I don't feel particularly quite right here. And what you're actually feeling yourself is their feelings, is their emotions, and that allows you to then sense what that person's feeling. Isn't that extraordinary that we can now we've always done this, many people have always done this, but science is now showing that it's absolutely factual. And you know, here's something else I'd like to also share at the workshop, and I don't want to give too much away right now because it's such an interesting thing for me, is that scientists in the latter half of 2010, one of the world's most eminent neuroscientists, Villeneuve Ramachandran, found evidence that we have the neurological capacity to see auras of colour around people. That's extraordinary, because that's something that was always dished. I used to work as a scientist in a big pharmaceutical company. Whenever anyone mentioned, which wasn't very often in that scientific environment, but if someone had ever mentioned something in relation to seeing auras, you know, people would dismiss it as pseudoscience and nonsense. But here we have the latter half of 2010, cast iron evidence for the neurological capacity to see auras of colour around people, which actually changes in response to how a person is feeling, to their emotional state. And it works in a very similar way to the fact that we read happiness or sadness from a person in their facial expressions. It's just a slight change in the wiring of the brain, but I'll tell you more about it on the day, exactly how that actually works. And you know, something else I intend to cover as well is another area of this, a deeper area that has interested me for quite some time, is what if you're not just in a person's company, but what if you're separated by large distances? Now, I've wondered for a long time that can we also sense states and people at a distance? And you know, there is some evidence. It's not always given, you know, fair credence by scientists, but I believe that there is a deeper, more subtle interconnectedness between all of life, and perhaps a similar kind of thing goes on that also allows us to sense things at great distances. So this is something that I'm also intending on exploring on the day. So I'm looking forward to meeting you, and I hope this little introduction has been quite stimulating for you and might even encourage you to come along on the day. See you soon.